Okay, next we've got House File 2732. Representative Erickson is here. The chair's intention is to lay this bill over. Representative Erickson, I will move the DE1 amendment for you at this time to get the bill in the shape that you would like. Those in favor of the DE1 signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The amendment's adopted and the bill is in the order that you would like. Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee, for hearing this proposal. House File 2732, as amended, is a result of a discussion that Commissioner Landwehr and I had a couple of weeks ago. I have a very good working relationship with Commissioner Landwehr. Spend a great deal of time with him and others who had fisheries in our state as we work diligently with Gliffwick on the 1837 ceded territory agreements that exist between the state and the 8 bands. So you will see, members, that this is permissive. The commissioner doesn't have to invite fish managers. He is the one who defines who a fish manager is. He would designate, and you may not know, but the chair has attended these technical meetings with me, as of course Representative Lewick. Representative Lewick and I represent Lake Mille Lacs. That's the prime fishing spot that 1837 is concerned with. And Representative Heitzman has attended, as has Senator Brood and Senator Ingebretson. And I think that's the entire lineup, plus we've had staff. My attendance has been at the request of the governor, so I continue to attend these technical meetings. And I know the commissioner really appreciates my input as I observe and give him feedback, and Don Pereira as well, and other fisheries experts. So that, Mr. Chair, in a nutshell, is this proposal. And as I said, it's permissive and it's designated by the commissioner.
Thank you. Member questions, comments? Representative Becker-Finn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is actually a question for research. So this bill is about the Fisheries Technical Committee, which is different than the advisory committee, just for the public's benefit regarding Mille Lacs. And I'm wondering if research, can you talk about what the mechanism is by which this technical committee was set up in the first place, as far as, was it legislation, was it agreement, was it court order? If you could enlighten us, that would be helpful.
Ms. Taylor.
Mr. Chair, members, I know it wasn't legislatively mandated. There's nothing in statute, and I don't remember the history. It'd either be, I know some of the groups were court ordered, but I don't know if this particular one was.
Representative Becker-Finn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will point members to a letter that was in our materials from the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, so Gliffwick. And to be honest, I've been working with the reference library for the last couple days trying to answer that question about where the technical committee was originally set up. And it does reference, so this letter references protocol number 1, and then has states how the committee was supposed to be set up. And according to this letter, it's a government-to-government basis by which the technical committee was set up. So, it's it may, or if it was set up by court order, I don't know if that protocol 1 is in reference to a court order. Maybe Representative Erickson's shaking her head. Could you speak to, maybe the history of where the technical committee, where that came from?
Mr. Chair, members, and Representative Becker-Finn, when the Supreme Court ruled in 1999 in a 5-4 ruling that those who fished, hunted, and gathered in the 1837 treaty area still had those rights, what the court did say is the state of Minnesota and these 8 bands get together and make some decisions about how you should handle this decision by the Supreme Court. And so protocols were written, and you're correct, one of the protocols does deal with having a fisheries technical committee. Because remember, members, that the state of Minnesota has a co-management or a collaboration on fish harvest management only, dealing with the 1837. So it's dealing with the harvest management, that's the focus. And protocols needed to be put in place so that there was a structure to follow. And those protocols are what the DNR and GLFWIC, who's the umbrella for the 8 bands, follows. So it was not a court order, it was a decision made between the two parties.
Representative Becker-Finn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it would be helpful to see, it sounds like there was a written agreement between the state of Minnesota, DNR, and GLFWIC, and that would be really helpful to see, because the language here doesn't look like, again, that we as the state can order Mille Lacs or GLFWIC to do anything. And so, Representative Erickson, did you, as you were putting together this language, I'm happy to hear that you consulted with Commissioner Landwehr. Did you also speak with GLFWIC or Mille Lacs directly?
Representative Erickson.
Mr. Chair and Representative, no, I didn't speak directly with GLFWIC, but I talked to GLFWIC quite often at the technical meetings. They know that I have a passion for making sure that our legislative representatives can attend, and they appreciate that. And the protocols are a number, and that is an agreement between the bands and the state. So to answer your question, I guess no, I haven't talked to them directly, but I've spoken to them privately.
Representative Becker-Finn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, if this is a committee between sovereign nations and the state of Minnesota, it's really helpful to talk to each of those entities about issues like this instead of going forward without talking to them, because it sounds like there's already an agreement that the House and Senate chairs of the environment committees are permitted to observe but not participate in the meetings. And you mentioned yourself and Representative Heinzman and Representative Chair Fabian have attended those meetings. So I'm just not sure what we're doing here when one of the parties to this agreement hasn't been consulted with and isn't, we have this letter from October 18th, 2017, opposed to making any changes to those previous agreements. So I guess I'm just not sure why we need to legislate something that we may not be able to even enforce against a sovereign nation.
Mr.
Chair.
Chair.
Erickson.
Well, we represent the state of Minnesota. We don't represent the 8 bands under the agreement. We represent the state of Minnesota. And this is permissive language for the commissioner, if he chooses, to bring the same kind of observers that the bands bring to these technical meetings. And if the commissioner decides not to, he doesn't have to. But he will make the decision. Or if it's someday a female, she will make the decision. So this is totally permissive, and it's in the hands of the commissioner.
Representative Becker-Finn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, even if the commissioner, current commissioner, or future commissioner chooses to exercise this, by doing this without agreeing with GLFWIC and the tribes, if the tribes are opposed to it, it's not going to work. We can't make the tribes add additional requirements to their nation-to-nation agreement regarding the setup of the technical committee. We do not have jurisdiction to order the tribes to do anything.
Mr. Chair, this is permissive, and this is for state only. This is permissive.
Sure.
This is the commissioner's purview.
Representative Becker-Finn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I understand that. The Fisheries Technical Committee, though, is not a standalone DNR committee. If this was a committee set up by the state and by the DNR on their own, they would certainly have the authority to do that. But we, as the state of Minnesota, cannot force changes to agreements with other nations. It's legally, we have no jurisdiction to do that. So I understand that it's permissive. Certainly the amendment is much better than the original language. And there are plenty of ways that the DNR can update folks on what's happening at these meetings. And, you know, it's clear that you've attended and folks have attended in the past. And again, we can't, I just don't know what we're doing here with this bill. And I would really encourage you to communicate directly with your constituents who are Mille Lacs members and consult with the tribe in Glifook directly, because as I've said multiple times, you know, our native Minnesotans are Minnesotans too, and many of us represent those folks, and it's important that they be included in these discussions instead of legislating over things that we likely don't even have jurisdiction to change. So, thank you.
Representative Erickson.
Mr. Chair, this is permissive language, and it's in the hands of the commissioner.
Thank you. Representative Luick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Erickson, for bringing this to our attention. I guess as to a question about discussing this has been discussed since what, since the Supreme Court ruling. So the idea that we're not consulting is far from the truth. This language simply makes it very clear to the Commissioner of Natural Resources that if he determines that he wants someone there to observe, doesn't say participate, it says attend, that he's allowed to do that, and not allowed to do that, but encouraged to do that. I've attended one of those meetings, and after I observed that, I made a commitment to myself and my constituents, all of them, Native American and non-Native American, that I would not ever attend another one of those meetings unless either both groups specifically invited me or the Department of Natural Resources invited me. There's a gut-wrenching problem that's been going on there since the beginning of this, and that is people don't understand what the technical committee does. And you know, like it or not, this is Minnesota, and we have a long history of bright sunlight, observing at least how we make decisions. And I would suggest that rather than leaving the communities to speculate on what may or may not have taken place at these technical committee meetings, and then second guessing whether the DNR is accurate in their portrayal of what happened. When we get to third and fourth hand information, we all know where that leads. It leads to wild speculation and rarely close to the truth of what happened. So this is simply a opportunity here to make it very clear that if the commissioner decides that he wants to bring somebody that has lived on the lake their entire life, may very well have both educational and personal experience credentials that have to do with the fishery, that he can invite him to attend. I mean, this is really basic stuff. I would hope that if we can get to that point where there's an opportunity to open this up, that we would end some of the bitterness and divisiveness that's went on now for 20 years. Because, like it or not, when you can't see in the box, you're going to wonder what's in there and you're going to speculate on what's going on. And we've just got to end that. And that would be a real step forward for both parties in this situation. This provides the Department of Natural Resources Commissioner with the insurance that the state of Minnesota is behind him on a very simple thing, deciding who can accompany him or his representative into the room. Doesn't say they're going to participate, it says they're going to attend.
Representative Uglum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Representative Erickson. Again, thank you for bringing this bill for our consideration. You know, one of the biggest things that we always talk about in this committee, and it's incumbent on us too, is transparency in government. And that's why we're holding these public hearings to the public and everything else. So, you know, this bill, I think that goes a long ways towards that and will eliminate a number of problems. If you read in some of the local papers and press about some of the issues that are, as Representative Hansen likes to say, in the dark of the night or whatever. But it is a little bit behind closed doors, and transparency in government is good. And this is not going to change the dynamics in any respect. These are observers that will be there. It's just better government for this panel. Thank you again, Representative Erickson.
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my question's on the letter from the commission, and I'm just wondering, because it talks about agreements, it's a little bit off topic, but Representative Erickson, you had mentioned that a number of people have attended these meetings and for observing. And it looks to me that the agreement was with the House and Senate chairs. It talks about the House and Senate chairs of Environment and Natural Resources with jurisdiction are permitted to observe. And then later on it says 4 particular legislators. So am I correct, Mr. Chair, that the 4 would be the chairs, but also Representative Erickson and Representative Lueck? Or I'm trying to count from 2 to 4. I'm not quite.
3. Representative Erickson.
I'm not sure how this works.
I think the agreement that was reached informally a few years ago was chairs or their designees. But in conversations with the governor, he has said many times over that I'm the one who has the keenest interest in this. It is part of my district, and he would appreciate if I could attend. And just to add to that, my attendance and my interaction with both Gliffwick and with the DNR has resulted in minutes being taken now at these technical meetings, and the minutes then are posted. And Gliffwick, I must say, is very good about posting the minutes. You noticed in the original bill that I wanted the reference library, and I'm so glad to see Elizabeth Lincoln here today because I have worked with her, because the DNR does not have an archival library, that the reference library was willing to take the documents that are collected from all the agreements that the DNR makes. They make hundreds of agreements all the time. I mean, their accumulation, I can't even imagine what it numbers. But, if they so choose now, they can archive them in the reference library. But we've made great strides over the last few years on ensuring accountability and, as I've heard members say, transparency. And that's so important for us as lawmakers and policymakers here in the state of Minnesota, that when we have an agency, the DNR, involved in a treaty conclusion by the Supreme Court, that we are doing our utmost to make sure the people of Minnesota are engaged and understand what goes on. And the technical meetings are technical, and I've learned a great deal and have come to really understand what the DNR has to go through as they negotiate the harvest management, especially in particular walleye. So we've made great strides, and I think it's really important that the chairs attend. But as the commissioner and I discussed, because the bands bring fish managers, if he would like to designate, some fish managers, he may bring them.
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I don't think we have any fish managers around the table here, but my question is on kind of the formal, is there a formal notification that, when control changes or there's changes in personnel, and you mentioned that Representative Heinzman went, Representative Lueck went, how does that designate? Does there have to be a formal notice to the group that here these folks are going to be attending as designated by the chair? I'm just following up on Representative Becker-Finn's question about when we're collaborating with the sovereign nation, how much communication is there, or are people just showing up? And I understand when people are representing the area, but I don't know, literally don't know how this works. So how do we handle those changes if people, let's say if Representative Eklund was interested or Representative Becker-Finn was interested, can they go, does there have to be a formal process to notify? I don't know the answer to that, Mr. Chair.
Sure. I can address that slightly, and then I'll let Representative Erickson. I get a letter whenever, and there's 4 chairs on that letter. Myself, Representative Swedzinski, Chair Ingebrigtsen, and Chair Rude over in the Senate. I've asked a couple of times for Representative Heinzman to go to be my representative at the meetings. We are told on August when I went that we were told we were there to observe. The part about this being technical, I agree. I was reminded in the committee, I remember what it was, one night this week, that I'm a Phi Ed teacher and a track coach. That's what I was reminded of. I am not a scientist, okay? And I was also reminded that I don't understand technical things at times, and I admit that, okay? So I think it's helpful to have somebody else there. I mean, I'd love to have someone come with me who is a fisheries biologist, somebody who understands some of the conversation that's going on. And as Representative Uglum referred to this whole process, and Representative Luick, I think openness and transparency, and I think if Representative Eklund wanted to go, Representative Becker-Finn wanted to go, I don't quite understand why there would be resistance to letting people just be there to observe what's going on. What's the big secret? And then, of course, the other thing that spews or spurns some problems is the, quote, secret agreement that was reached, and the documents were not released to the public for quite some time, and someone just happened to stumble onto them. So these problems, you know, kind of grow and multiply. And I think, as we've said in this committee many times, that openness and transparency in a process is good. Representative Erickson.
Mr. Chair, I'm just so happy that you were able to hear this bill and that we've had this good discussion. I appreciate this time.
You're okay. You're fine. It's all right. Okay. Representative Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the concerns I have with the bill as being presented here is I feel it's sending some messages that may not be intended along the line, or it feels like one of the messages I'm perceiving out of this is that we're minimizing the sovereign governments, the tribes out there, because we're mandating something in. And the reason I'm feeling this way is because I'm not seeing the reach out to the sovereign nations who are involved and saying, you know, this is what we'd like to be able to do, and come up with something that's got peace in the valley. It feels very much like we've got a power dynamic here where we're trying to force something onto a situation instead of approaching them in a way that might be something that would be easily resolvable instead of having to go through a process like this. To me, it feels like we're being disrespectful to the sovereign nations by taking this approach without consulting and involving them in the process.
Thanks. Representative Becker-Finn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and just kind of a follow-up to some of the comments of Representative Luick about this being, you know, kind of a gut-wrenching issue for a long time. And I imagine, you know, you were likely referring to how long some of the legal battles have gone on regarding Mille Lacs, but really, we're talking about back to 1837 when the treaty was initially set up. And, you know, as we have outlined in the Supreme Court, and for everybody's edification, I'm talking about the Supreme Court of the United States. So this was heard by the U.S. Supreme Court. In the opinion, they lay out, you know, some of the games that were played by the federal government with moving where annuity payments could be picked up, and in the meantime, around 150 Chippewa died in an outbreak of measles and dysentery. Another 230 Chippewas died on the winter trip home to Wisconsin. And this had to do with kind of playing games about where food and money could be picked up and then not handing out that money. So I bring that up because I think it speaks to the long-standing distrust from a lot of Native folks when it comes to things that are forced upon them. And so if we're really serious about coming to a place where we can move past some of the hard feelings, pushing legislation without conversations, you know, us dictating something, even, you know, and it's not necessarily like the language itself is not problematic. It's the way that we're doing this without there being agreement or even a conversation. You know, having spoken to somebody in the past about something else is not the same as addressing this specific issue. So obviously it's a really difficult issue, but forcing one side to do something is not how we reach a place where we can start to move past some of the hard feelings here. So, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I want you and members to know that the 8 bands don't come to us and ask us. So, you know, these are 2 different entities, and I'm speaking on behalf of the state of Minnesota. That's the law that we have purview over. That's the policy over which we have purview. So this is just the way it is. You know, I represent all people in my district, but as a policymaker, I'm here at the legislature working with the DNR, not with Gliffwick and not with the bands. I'm working with the DNR. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, so with that, House File 2732 is laid over.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.